Hello everyone and welcome back to the Helderberg Chess Club channel, and welcome back to episode 2 of our series New to Chess, which is basically designed for players who are completely new to chess and know nothing or very little about how to actually play the game. And in this video, as you can see by the title, I'm going to talk about some basic concepts in the opening in chess. So, of course, this is the starting um, position in chess, and white has the first move. Just by the way, if you're unfamiliar with uh, uh, the chess rules, please check out our first video where I explain where you can go learn how to play chess, also on this site, lichess.org. In any case, I want to talk about some basic ideas in the opening and what you should do to play a good opening in chess. Now, generally in the opening, there are some principles you want to follow. So the first one I'm going to talk about is controlling the center. And the center refers usually to these four squares, e4, d4, d5, and e5. And the reason you want to control these squares is because, firstly, your pieces are more powerful on those squares. For instance, if we look at this knight, over here on the side, or in starting position, it only has 3 squares it can move to. But if we were to imagine it here, for instance, then it would be able to move here, 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 or here. So it actually has 8 potential moves. So the center is very important to control for that exact reason. Another reason is that it makes your pieces very flexible. For instance, your pieces could move either to either side of the board, either the king side or the queen side, whenever they need to, if they are located in the center. So because it's very customary for you to control the center, it's very important for you to control the center in the opening. The most common opening moves for white are the moves e4 and d4. And of course, these are good moves because, if you say play the e4, then you're controlling this square, and you can already see that you're starting to occupy the center and exerting control over it. And if you were to play e4, for instance, then you would also be controlling the center. And there are some less common moves with c4 as well as knight to f3. And again, you see that the knight, you think about it attacking these two center squares. So it's already starting to control these squares. Alright, so another important concept um, in chess is development of your pieces in the opening. So generally what that means is you see how all your pieces start on the back row here. You don't want them there because they're not doing anything. You want them to start attacking your opponent because obviously you have to go checkmate their king. So what that means is in the opening you want to open up space for your pieces to move, and you want to move them away from the back row so that they become more active and they actually start exerting pressure on your opponent's position. So for instance, if we just put some moves on the board here for both sides, we see that in a position like this, both sides have already moved their knights out and their bishops out. And so they're developing very well here because these pieces are far more active on the squares where they currently are than they were before. See how they're all attacking the center, for instance. They're all controlling squares in the center of the board. So this would be a very good way to play because you're following the important opening principles. Okay, and then one other opening principle that we should mention is castling. So you don't necessarily castle early in every opening. However, your king starts in the center of the board, as you can see, where it's rather exposed. But the point of castling is essentially to get your king safer, because of course the point of chess is to checkmate the enemy king. So it's often a very good idea to castle because you can put your king safely on the side of the board. And if I were just to show you this, then your king would now be protected by the rook and all these pawns in front of it as well. Especially if you move your center pawns, then your king's going to be very exposed in the center. So it's important that you bring your king to safety at some point. Okay, and then one last thing I want to talk about is the queen in the opening. Now, generally, you don't want to move your queen out too early in the opening, because then your opponent can attack it and chase it away, and you'll probably end up moving your queen more than once. So you don't want to expose your queen in the opening. The general principle is that it's best to develop, although this is certainly not always true, but the general rule is that you develop your minor pieces first, so your knights and your bishops, usually knights before bishops, and then you only develop your queen so that your queen is more protected and it's less vulnerable to your opponent attacking it and chasing it away. And then one other thing to remember in the opening is, considering that development is important and king safety is important, what you don't want to do is play moves like this. So for instance, if you were to move your bishop here and your opponent wants to play a move like this, you don't want to start playing like this with your pieces. Okay, these are bad moves, of course, because, okay, this pawn's hanging and so on. You don't want to move the same pieces over and over again, because that means you're going to be losing time. As you can see, black actually already has a significant lead in development, because they've moved out 2 knights in the time that you've only moved 1 bishop, because you've moved your bishop 3 times. And this would be a very bad way to play, because what you're effectively doing is giving your opponent more time, and if they develop their pieces more quickly, they will be able to attack first, and you will be forced into a passive position where you have very limited options in general. Now, one last thing I want to mention is that these principles that I mentioned, things like controlling the center, not moving the queen out too early, developing your pieces, castling, at times they can be broken. They're not always religiously followed, and you don't always have to do these exact things. Although if you're a new player, I do highly recommend that you follow these principles for the most part, because it's just a very safe and solid way to play for you to get a decent position out of the opening without falling into opening traps and things like that where you'll get caught out by your opponent. But that being said, there are some openings where it's okay to break the opening principles. And that's another thing I want to mention is about opening theory. So opening theory in chess is basically, there are different kinds of openings in chess. So for example, if white were to play the move pawn to e4, there are several responses here for black, including e4, e5, which is called the king's pawn opening, c5, which is the Sicilian defense, e6, which is the French defense, even d6 potentially heading into the Pierce defense. And all these moves are playable for black. And the opening theory is essentially the idea that all these different openings exist and games have been played in all these different openings. So opening theory explains the best moves in each position, or the possible moves in each position that have already been tried and have been seen to be successful. So that means that if you were, for instance, to play the move e6, This would be the French defense, and there are many different variations here. Actually, we've made a video about the French defense, so if you're interested in this opening, you could go look at that. But basically, the opening theory explains different moves that are playable in based on what your opponent plays in the French defense. So you can prepare a lot of the opening because, of course, the starting position is always the same, and that's essentially the purpose of opening theory. But again, like I said, if you're a new player, you probably don't want to spend too much time studying and memorizing opening theory if you don't have a good understanding or decent understanding of the game already. You just want to follow these basic opening principles, and those will help you to get a good position out of the opening, or at least a decent position out of the opening, for the most part. In any case, if you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Keep playing chess, and have a nice day.